It's January 12th, 2020, and welcome to episode 27 of the Baby Metal podcast. We gather in the podcast Discord server on alternate weeks to discuss news and thoughts on the past and future projects of Baby Metal. We invite you to join us, whether you're a longtime fan or have only just arrived. I am Paul, and I am joined by Kevin.
Happy New Year. Welcome back, everyone.
And Garrett.
Hello, how's it going?
Well. So I wanted to say a quick sort of like format note. I don't think we said this before, but 2019 was a year in which there were it was both a lot of uncertainty and a lot of news, and we mostly got sort of carried along with that tsunami. And that provided a lot of interesting things to speculate about, but of course speculations about future events have sort of a limited shelf life since the future eventually arrives. And then after that, it's not interesting to listen to us speculate about things that went some other way. So in 2020, I think we're going to try to plan to, still talk about news and even continue to speculate lightly. But we're also going to try to turn a bit more of our attention to things that have already happened, including things from the more distant past that newer fans might not be aware of yet, or even longtime fans haven't thought about for a while. So, in other words, things that might make this still be interesting to listen to, even after several months, after it was recorded. So sort of along those lines, we're going to have a topic that we'll talk about today, which is actually just a couple of interviews that came out recently. But we've done a couple of the topics, these sort of topic-based shows in the past. So episodes 4 and 5 were about the graphic novel. Episode 7 was about Doki Doki Morning, which is the first single from Baby Metal. Episode 14, we did interviews with Koba Metal, and we'll have more of those too in the future, I guess. And then I think episode 18, we had background to the Avengers and some Sakura Gakuin. And then episodes 23 and 24 were themed around the album review of Metal Galaxy. So that's kind of the model. And although now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that we never did figure out what our topic was going to be next time. But we'll try to announce topics in advance so that you can join in and maybe refresh your memory too if you'd like. And any topic ideas you have would be welcome too. Anyway, that sound right?
Yeah, New Year, New Us.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the recent news section, there's not a whole lot. We got a New Year's tweet from Baby Metal, since we haven't actually talked since then. It's pretty ridiculous, in a certain sense.
It's like every single photo we get, they just add more and more color to it. More and more overlaying of galaxies.
How many layers can we fit in Photoshop before we run out of memory and crash the computer?
Yeah. So it's sort of the standard photo, but then with it really is just about 35 overlays.
Yeah.
And same hashtags as last year too.
Yeah, but hey, it's a photo. I like seeing photos.
Yeah,
We should almost be expecting another tweet from Baby Metal soon, but I don't think we will.
About what?
You and Moa's coming of age, more so Moa's, I guess.
No, it's
Today
both
is
of
the
them.
day.
It would be both of them.
Mm-hmm.
You think they'd announce both?
No, I don't think they will at all. But the holiday, if you can call it that, covers anybody who turned 20 in the last year.
It is both of them.
And up to, I think, April this year. So that would cover both you and Moa.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So first attempt with our new format. We have already jumped right into the middle of the next section, but
we have jumped the shark.
So the coming of age day thing is the first bullet point in the soon to be obsolete speculations about the future section. So, but yeah, it is. So today is the coming of age day, and today in the sense of January 13th. So there's a chance that we'll get photos. Do either of you want to say anything about what this means, like what we're expecting?
Oh, I'm not expecting anything.
Well, okay, so imagine...
Yeah, realistically.
What I meant more was like what kinds of things we expect from people that we do expect things from. Like...
Say in the past, Sue got Legend S.
Well, and Mo got Legend M. But I
age.
don't think that on Coming of Age Day, the band tweeted anything for Sue.
No.
I don't think.
Wasn't there a picture of her on her 20th birthday?
Yes,
there was.
That's not the same day.
No,
though.
that was the after show picture for Legend S, which was in December
Okay.
on her birthday, or the weekend near her
I get
birthday.
Right.
Nothing for Coming of Age Day.
Right.
But yeah, if you don't know, it's kind of a big deal. In the Western world, we kind of celebrate 18 and 21 as kind of the big birthdays, especially in the US. 21, you can drink. 18, you're legally an adult. That's all wrapped into one in Japan when you turn 20. You are an adult when you turn 20 years old. So they do a big old day to celebrate it. And they dress up in fancy clothes and have parties and things like that. Women wear kimonos, which is pretty cool. So I don't think we'll see any of that. But for the eagle-eyed and savvy listener or fan, you might get some emoji-covered photos from some of their friends. You never know.
Right. Yes, that was what I was fishing for, was like what coming of age day actually is. So it's not the birthday. It's kind of like a consolidated celebration for all the people who became adults in the past year.
Everyone.
So, and one of the main things that we see about that is that they're dressed up, that they're in the sort of traditional, usually some kind of a traditional dress. It's a big thing. And so we have often seen photos of people in their coming of age day, outfits, not specifically baby metal and maybe not even specifically Sakura Gakuin, although like some of the graduates we've seen photos from.
We have. And I wouldn't expect anything official. Like I said, you might see Moa's friend group post a group photo because they all turned 20 in the last year with a covered up emoji face.
Right.
But I'm not even sure that'll happen. But it's a big deal. So, it's pretty cool. Yep. Congratulations to everybody who turned 20 in the last year.
Congratulations to not only the two we know, but all the many that we don't.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the thing about talking about this today, is that by the time this gets onto the feeds, we'll know very well that they didn't show us anything.
Yeah. I feel like we need something like that over here. I feel like I deserved something when I turned 21 or something. Celebrate me.
Yeah.
I should have been celebrated.
So the other sort of like soon to be obsolete speculation about the future is Legend Metal Galaxy, which is coming up super soon.
2 weeks.
Yep. January 26th to 27th. And you, Kevin, are about to head off to see it.
Yes, I will be there in a week from the time of recording.
Are you excited?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I'm jealous.
How could you not be excited going to Japan and going to baby metal concerts in Japan?
I wish I could go to Japan so bad.
October. You got to get there.
I'm going to try my best.
The whole fan community needs to be there in October. It's going to be special.
Yeah. Although it'll turn out that the actual event is going to be in some other country, so hopefully not everybody's in Japan.
Oh, could you imagine?
But we still don't. I'm optimistic. I mean, so here's the part where we speculate about things that are known by the time this gets on the feed. But actually, maybe not quite. But I am optimistic that we will learn something about the 10/10/2020 event by the end of Legend Metal Galaxy. I hope so.
Yeah, my gut says we'll get a lore video at the end for whatever's happening in October. Either not revealing their hand completely, but at least giving us more information so we can plan. And then I would expect more information, or maybe the final bit or details around Fox Day, April 1st.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they would wait or do anything special like that on their European tour. That wouldn't really make sense to me. This is kind of their last opportunity to address the home fans and the home crowd with some sort of information or announcement on what's coming in October.
Right. And actually, I mean, we've noted this before, but the European tour starts right away. I mean, Legend Metal Galaxy is on the 27th, and then they're in Stockholm on February 3rd.
Yeah, it's not as bad as their same-day flight after Yokohama, but it's pretty quick. Yeah, we're going to be back in the mix of it. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I'm going to follow it quite as diligently as I followed the U.S. ones, but we'll see. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's more work for them, but
yeah, it's
a lot of work for us too.
Absolutely. I imagine we're going to see much of the same stuff in Europe as we saw on the U.S. tour.
Yeah.
I don't think Kano will be there. It'll be Momoko and Riho alternating for your Avengers. My only big question is who's playing the music.
That is a good question.
Because we had, the American commies from Galactic Empire for the whole U.S. tour. And if
I'd wager we have Japanese commies then. I don't know. I want to predict something.
that's kind of what I'm thinking too, just because it doesn't make sense to fly US musicians over. So either we're either going to get a brand new set of commie band members, or I think they're going to fly the Japanese guys over.
Mm-hmm. Or all of the ground will shift at Legend Metal Galaxy, and all of this stuff will become obsolete.
Yeah.
I think since we're on the train of useless speculation that's going to expire soon, how do you guys ponder the idea of Night Night Burn being played for the first time at Metal Galaxy, Legend Metal Galaxy, and then carried out through the rest of the European tour? Played by Japanese guitarists.
I'm hoping that
or musicians.
They're going to play the rest of the album over the course of the 2 nights.
That would be nice. That would be really nice.
Oh, at Legend Metal Galaxy.
At Legend Metal Galaxy, yeah. I mean, just because of the name. They're calling it a Legend show. It's the same legend as the album title. It, to me, at least, wouldn't make sense to just do another Forum set list, for example.
But you know what's weird about this? It's listed as an extra show. I mean, it's called Legend Metal Galaxy and all that. But it's also just an extra show.
Yeah.
So they kind of deflated what they got out of Legend by calling it that.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe. I hope not. I mean, it'll still be fun, but really the tipping point for me going was them labeling it a Legend show.
Right.
I have more I want to say about this, but I can't. But I'd be jumping ahead to the very last thing we're trying to talk about.
Well, I appreciate your restraint.
Yes.
Can you remember it?
Announcing it.
So it has nothing to do with Legend Metal Galaxy?
No, it does.
I'll allow it.
But okay. Since it's in the NYLON interview, we'll get to a little bit later. It says that they were already preparing for Legend Metal Galaxy and a lot of time for rehearsal because they'll even present new things. They'll practice everything a lot because Baby Metal's music is kind of difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
But I feel like because they'll even present new things, kind of hold some weight to it.
Oh, yeah.
Cam Metal in chat speculates night 1 will be disc 1 and night 2 will be disc 2.
That'd be beautiful, wouldn't it?
And that's kind of in the back of my mind what I've been thinking too. At least that's what I've been hoping. That makes the most sense to me on the outside, with the usual stuff that they sprinkle in. Because obviously playing just disc 1 would be a 20-minute concert, so they're not going to do that. But I think it could fall in the line with something kind of like that format.
I wonder to what extent there are people who are going to just one night. Because
good question.
I remember hearing at least that people were at some point disappointed with the Tokyo Dome show for having gone to like one night and not the other, so missing the song that they wanted to hear.
Right.
So that sort of affects like whether I would believe that they would play Gimme Chocolate both nights, and that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah, but how much have they cared about fan input in the past? So
yeah, right.
This is definitely a band that chooses its own adventure.
Yeah, and this also connects a little bit too, but I wonder if it seems kind of obvious that night 1 would be disc 1 and night 2 would be disc 2. Isn't that exactly the last thing they would do?
Logically, yeah. It makes sense.
You bring up a good point.
So, anyway, we'll know soon. I really don't know what to expect. I keep live possibilities in my mind that maybe they really will do something dramatic, and not just in the set list, but in the presentation entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Which would then, of course, carry over to the European tour as well.
Makuhari is a big place with a lot of room for cool stuff, so they've done neat presentations there before, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. All right. So now maybe we can move to the actual interviews. I'm not sure how this is going to go. So maybe we can just sort of bumble our way through it and come up with interesting things along the way. Okay. But just as an introduction, both Hedabon, particularly Hedabon and PMC, the PM Music Complex magazines, have had fairly substantial interviews with various people on the Baby Metal team. So there's a September 2019 issue of PMC that we've only just gotten the translation for the SU-METAL and MOAMETAL interview. So we had some other stuff before. There was a 100-question question and answer with SU-METAL and MOAMETAL that we had before. And we talked last time about interviews with Mikiko. And that issue also has an interview with BABYMETAL. And of course, the disadvantage we have is that they're all in Japanese, which means we have to kind of wait for the translations. And we've recently gotten the translation of both the Su and Mo one and the Mikiko one from @mybabel on Reddit. So that is absolutely wonderful. Thank you for doing that. If you are listening, and if you're not, thank you anyway. And then the 100-question Q&A we got was translated by Lenzer. So we don't yet have, I forget if I said this already, but we don't yet have the BABYMETAL interview translated. I pushed it through Google Translate, so I can maybe say a couple of things about it with some knowledge of what it's saying. And there are huge interviews in Hedoban 24 that we do not have yet, so there's going to be more of this stuff to come. But I think these two Japanese ones were substantial enough that it's actually kind of worth talking about them in depth, and it'll remind us about other stuff to talk about as we go. Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, so basically I was thinking that we would center around the two sort of newly available interviews, one from NYLON, February 2020, so that one's recent, and then one from PMC Volume 15, which was from September 2019. And I thought maybe starting with NYLON, the recent one first, would make sense just because it's shorter. So I don't know how we would like to start, but somebody else start talking.
Okay. It begins off by talking about the atmosphere of the photo shoot, because the NYLON magazine has a really cool photo shoot. It's like it's kind of hard to describe. They're like glowing red and pink with like a couple red and blue filters laid over them. It's kind of interesting looking. But the interview goes on to say what kind of relationships they've had with metal legends that they've met recently, like say with Metallica and stuff like that. They say they're always really friendly to meet backstage. Moa says they speak open with us, sometimes copy our Gimme Chocolate choreography and dance with us together. I think that's just great.
I think that is very cool. I hadn't written anything down about the photo shoot, but it's striking.
You like those 3D glasses from like my childhood, at least, like the red and blue. That's what it reminds me of. But
yeah, I was going to say that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say too. That like I hesitate about this. It's art, and some art is better than others and differs from person to person. I find it a little bit unclear. I would prefer like a straightforward photo, but you're right. This totally looks like a 3D image in a way. I mean, it's not actually, of course, because one side is shaded blue and one side is shaded red, but the I don't know, colors are definitely those.
I think 3D is a good way to describe it. I was also thinking Empire Strikes Back. If you've seen Empire Strikes Back, when Luke fights Vader in the middle of it, there's a lot of blue and red going on. And I think it's pretty cool. I think it's definitely evocative of kind of the theme of Metal Galaxy and kind of the light versus dark side, and then leaning into the always present Star Wars lore that Koba loves. Right.
Yeah.
So of course I would love just a straight white light photo, because you can, use that for wallpaper and things like that. But, I think it's cool to see something different.
Yeah. And, they said something that was sort of ambiguous near the end, which is, they were talking about Legend Metal Galaxy and what to expect. And Sue says, also, the poster visuals are a hint. Death. I don't know why I should put in death, but anyway. And I think, so the ambiguous part is I don't know what poster they're talking about. If they're talking about the NYLON poster, then, maybe 3D is a hint.
Well, the Legend Metal Galaxy poster is the sun and moon.
Right. So that's the other possible poster.
Making a Venn diagram together, I think.
And that in a sense, that would be a more sensible hint. That.
Are they bringing back the flying platforms? Sue on the giant sun flying from the left, and Moa on the moon flying from the right. They float into the black hole.
No, I don't think so. But I think tying it back to what we were talking about before the interview here, it could be, a dark side, light side, night 1, night 2 split. It could be something as simple as different graphics packages on the screen during each show.
Yeah. Another thing about the meeting the metal legends. Sue says, in our situation, it helped that we didn't know anything about metal in the beginning, so we often didn't know how big of a person was standing in front of us.
I will say about the NYLON interview that it does feel it's a lot of the same information from the just barrage of interviews we've had over the last year, but this one feels particularly genuine to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody else gets that sense from it.
Yeah, a little bit. We get our mandatory food reference from Moa.
Yeah, well, I think if she doesn't have a ready answer, she'll just go to food.
Yeah, that's her backup plan. Everybody's got one.
But yeah, so Moa about the metal legends also said it felt like we were their little nieces.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think what makes this one a little bit unique is it's forward-looking, whereas a lot of the previous interviews have been like present tense, talking about the release of Metal Galaxy and things like that. And there's stuff like that here too, but a lot of it is looking at things like Legend Metal Galaxy, the European tour, and reflecting on the 10 years. So it's kind of cool to see a shift in the talking points, if you will, from them.
Well, and so a lot of the other interviews were really kind of abbreviated or in English, and both of the interviews that are our topic today are kind of look back on the change, like what it meant to be new Baby Metal, right?
Right.
So the next thing that's in there is that they talk a little bit about what it's been like with the new formation with the Avengers. So, at this point, they've been doing this new formation for a while, and Sue says, when we first met with them, it felt a little bit like fumbling around. But, and this is sort of a common theme, too, that they, both Moa and Sue, Moa particularly, talks about how, and Mikiko, too, talk about how each of the Avengers really is different on stage and, requires tuning.
Sure.
They both think it's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely a good interview. I definitely recommend checking it out now that it's been translated.
There's other discussion about just the intensity of the tour, kind of making it all fly by. Everybody says this in all of these interviews. They all are, Koba and Sue and Mo are all saying, "I can't believe the time's gone already."
Spending half of your year on the road will make time fly.
Yeah. Here's the thing that we were talking about before. So, they're talking about preparing for Legend Metal Galaxy, and, Sue says, "That's right, because we do so much singing and dancing and even present new things. We spend a lot of time for rehearsal. We tend to worry about things," says Moa, "so we are the type of people that practice everything over and over again carefully." And Sue adds, "After all, Baby Metal's music is kind of difficult, Which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. After all this time, it's still a challenge.
Yeah.
Probably part of the reason they're still doing it.
There is a little bit of discussion. In the show notes, I put the strength of the bond, but NYLON asks, what their thoughts are of each other now that they're approaching 10 years together. And Sue says, "I don't know how to say it. When we tour together, we are more with each other than with family. She is something different from a friend. She's especially not a rival. She's a partner. But yeah, that sounds about right. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It also sounds like they're still getting along.
Yeah. Mo goes on to say, "That's right. It feels something like natural when we are together. We understand each other's strong and weak points. You could say we are opposite characters, but we are on the same wavelength. We take care of each other, and when we get a little bit stressed, we are able to relieve that stress together." Sounds like more of a sistership than a friendship.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's cool. That I believe is the most recent interview we have. It's in an issue of a magazine that's dated in the future. Hedobon 25 came out, but I don't think that has a interview. I think it just mentions Baby Metal.
Yes.
I was noticing in the chat that Cam Metal mentioned that Megitsune is still a challenge, and I forgot that was in this interview. Was it? Where is it?
Yeah, she's mentioned that before.
Yeah.
And, just listening to the song, it totally makes sense. There's so much range in that song. And I would imagine as she's gotten older and her voice has matured, considering it was written for when she was, 14 at the time.
Right.
I'm sure it's only gotten more difficult over time.
I think it's possible that's in the other interview.
I think it's in the other one. I don't think it's in the NYLON interview.
Yeah. But I think this is probably a good enough time to switch over to that one. So the PMC Volume 15, that was from September 2019. So it's actually a little bit before the album was released. So you have to kind of go back in time for that. But I thought it was actually quite... There's a number of things that I thought were interesting about that I really didn't feel like we knew before. This was just recently translated by atmybabel on the Reddit, and it's super interesting to read through this. I think that like the very first thing that kind of comes up, which I thought was very weird, was that they seem to say in a couple of different ways that they don't plan ahead as much as we give them credit for planning ahead.
They got the case of do it when we can.
I don't know. I've always been on I think they kind of wing it train, especially after 2018.
Yeah.
I've talked several times about how I think 2018 they made it up as they went along.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a weird sort of difference, I suppose, between like they sort of let off this interview by saying, you know, like last time we talked in April, you guys didn't know what you were doing, and by the time it got to the end of June, you'd already like figured it out. So the whole Avenger system was kind of all designed in May.
Mm-hmm. Well, we assume.
Yeah. Well, the implication is, you know, from reading the previous PMC interview, was that they didn't know in detail what they were going to do, just that they were going to continue.
Yeah, fair.
But that's sort of in contrast with these songs that take, you know, 3.5 years to write, and, you know, the inability to reschedule Legend Y and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's fun going back on this one because it's predated from when we got the translation, right? So there's some fun insight about how they were worried about we talked about this earlier, about making the connection after Yokohama all the way out to England, and then being worried if they were going to land on time, because they basically landed and went straight to the venue and got ready to perform. So where for a delayed flight, they might have missed that performance. I had not realized they cut it quite that close, which was interesting to hear.
Oh yeah, no, it was, I think they were being asked something like, what were the challenges of this like super hectic schedule? And they said basically, well, you know, it's like anyone, we're worried about a plane being late. Yeah. Okay. So PMC, the question was, looking from the outside, it's easy for us to take this as all being normal because you seem to take it for granted. But if we really think about the situation you were in, it must have put a lot of pressure on you. And MOAMETAL says, we realized later that we actually gave performances at Yokohama and then in England and then back in Nagoya, 6 live performances in total, covering more than one country in 10 days. Sue says it wasn't really like, you know, oh my God. We were worried about things like, will this plane land on time? But then Mo at the end says, but come to think of it, we did do something great, didn't we? So that was pretty cool.
Hey, that was pretty cool. We did a thing.
Yeah.
I found where I was talking about Megitsune.
Mm-hmm.
Says, can you think of any song which is especially hard for you to sing or which you are working on recently? You said before that Megitsune was that kind of song. SU-METAL replied, Megitsune never becomes easy for me no matter how many times I sing it. It has always been my most favorite song, yet a challenge to me as well. New songs are also challenging to me since I am not familiar with them, meaning my body not yet absorbing the combination of singing with doing choreography. That is why why am I having such a hard time reading this? I'm not crazy here.
No, there's a couple of missing verbs and stuff, but
she likes the new choreography and stuff that comes up. She enjoys that kind of stuff and takes the challenge along with Megitsune being a challenge as well, vocally.
Yeah, that's in a section. Like there's both a kind of like a technical exploration of you know, Moa's dancing and Sue's vocal work in here that I think is kind of interesting. So Sue, you know, talks a little bit about how she controls her voice, modulates it, you know, to require less breathing if she's got to focus more on dancing. Or what I thought was really striking was that you know, she says, since it would be much more difficult to do so when we perform at high altitude places abroad, I may alter the way I'm breathing when singing depending on where you are, that's amazing.
High altitude. Yeah.
Yeah, never really put thought into that. Not something I would have thought about.
They were in Denver, I think, right? Did they? Or something, it was Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
So they were definitely in some places where they were a little bit of altitude.
Yeah. And with Moa, Moa was, I guess, probably the one who was most kind of having to work with the Avengers, right? And so she actually talked, I thought it was pretty interesting. She said, of course, like, it was interesting, everybody brings their own character and all that stuff. But she kind of went into that a little bit more. She says, each of the dancers has their own way of dancing, like how to synchronize moving patterns to the sound and rhythm. Therefore, I found myself worrying much about whether I should let them dance in sync with me, or I do so with them. At one time, I thought what we have called baby metal may come apart if I would try to entirely accommodate myself to them. But we are not baby metal plus Avengers. We want to keep fighting our battles as baby metal. And when I came to see things that way, I decided not to simply adjust myself to the supporting dancers, but to still lean toward them without ever changing the essence of ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think that's it's sort of like a interesting and deep kind of thought. It's like she's basically trying to keep what makes baby metal baby metal.
Yeah, it's a very professional outlook. That's really cool insight, and it really underscores how much experience and how professional they are at what they do now. Because I think it would be really easy for her to say, well, I moa metal, you do what I do, right? But she knows that's not going to work.
Right. And I think it is sort of interesting how, she says she feels like she's learning how to dance with flexibility during the live stage performances, adjusting my moves according to who the supporting dancer is and that sort of thing. And I think we noticed that too, on a couple of occasions during the tour where, like, I think Riho slipped and Moa mirrored it.
Yeah, I think you're right, now that you mention it. She also talks about, the interviewer asks what she listens to, and Moa mentions that she basically only listens to Sue's voice. But since each Avenger has her own way of dancing, she may be more aware visually rather than through her ear monitor, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. How she's adapting how she performs, because I imagine she probably didn't need to look over at the stage a whole lot. They could do everything through the ear monitor. But now that she's dancing with somebody new, she's got to kind of keep an eye on what's going on over there, and not just listen to Sue's voice and her IEM.
Mm-hmm. There was another point. Basically, Sue said something that was actually kind of like what Moa said about, where was it? Sue says, after I'm informed that this song is inspired from such and such artists and their music, I would say, let's sing with these styles then and try more than one way of singing. But when I get too close to the sources, it would not be SU-METAL singing anymore. Therefore, I always thought about creating a vocal sound of SU-METAL, the evolved SU-METAL, while recording the album. Mm-hmm. And she talks about, the PMC asks, is it like controlling your voice more than usual? And Sue says, even by singing the same note, you can create a different sound. If you sing in a kawaii way, the note sounds a little higher to you. Or if you sing like bravely, then it sounds louder to you. But how did I sing Brand New Day? I just don't know how to express that in words. Which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I can see, reading her say that, I can see that's what she's doing.
Sure. Yeah, what I think I like about this interview as a whole is that number one, it feels less scripted or personal, like they're actually answering questions on the fly, but it kind of gives insight into their creative process and how they've evolved as musicians and artists, as singers and dancers, which I think is really interesting to kind of, because it's kind of, we haven't really had a whole lot of peek behind the curtain in a serious way since this whole ride started all those years ago, 10 years ago, right? So it's kind of cool to see how they do things and how they're able to reflect and learn from kind of where they started.
Yeah, and it's neat to see them thinking so sort of deeply about it, too.
Yeah. There was a time when I think this interview, most of the answers would have been only the Fox God knows.
Yeah, we do not miss those days.
Yeah. There were a couple other newsworthy things in here, I think. They talked a little bit about how songs will be sort of tuned through performances, and that sometimes they would, in several cases, perform a song a number of times before it even gets recorded in the studio. I don't know any good examples of that, to be honest, but...
And I want to say maybe like Kagero or Elevator Girl back when they first started playing them at the beginning of the US tour in 2019.
Is it
or 2018?
Is it this interview or one of the other ones where Moa talks about Kagero and how it changed from when they debuted it on tour to how
this one.
how she talks about singing in the chorus now?
I think it's towards the end
Is
of
it
this
toward the
one.
end of this one?
Yeah. I mean, so what they discussed in this interview was they mentioned the choreography changing in Java, although that's not super relevant. but they did one sort of like newsworthy thing in here was that when Kagero was Tattoo, Sue sang all of it by herself. And Moa said that once they were recording the album, Moa's singing in Kagero.
What's interesting about that to me is there was so much speculation around the community on who was in the backing track, who was singing during Tattoo and things like that. So it's like they inadvertently answered that question we had, I guess 2 years ago now,
right,
about who was singing what.
It was Sue the entire time.
Yeah. And now it isn't. So, I mean,
right.
I think that also wasn't exactly what people were expecting. They were expecting that it was a recorded thing that hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually another thing too that sort of goes back. Yeah, I put this up earlier in my notes, but that kind of goes along with the planning being surprisingly short range. Moa said that we worked so hard on recording BMC that it was only done 2 days in advance. Right?
Yeah, that's wild to me that they mastered that 2 days before the album came out. Logistically, how is that even possible with the amount of physical discs sold? Like, there must be a printing factory, the scale of which is incomprehensible to my brain.
Yeah, although I think actually my reading of that is that it's just a misspeaking, that it was 2 days before the Golden Master.
You think so?
Yeah.
That makes more sense because, when I read that, I was like, there's no way. Sure, the digitals, they can kind of do at will there, right? Yeah. But the physical copies, there's no way.
Well, and consider that BMC is on, the sun and moon and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I do believe that they were working on it all the way up until 2 days before some, freeze.
Sure. Okay.
But,
that makes more sense.
But so one thing that jumped out at me though is that what's MOAMETAL doing? Why is she the one that said we were working so hard on recording BMC unless she's in it? So I think that also answers the question of whether she's voicing some of this, which I kind of always thought she was, but still.
I assume she's in everything unless I'm told otherwise.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
But it's cool though. I mean, we actually have something real confirmation of this now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, that comes back to it's nice that they were able to or allowed to peel back the curtain a little bit and actually hear about some of the creative process and challenges and things like that they faced with releasing this album. It feels a lot more like any other band interview where they're able to just talk about whatever they want and not be in such a controlled environment, which was refreshing to me. It
does feel like that nowadays. They're no longer protecting the privacy of little 14 and 15-year-olds. They realize they're adults and they should be allowed to speak in interviews. It's not they're not hiding anything anymore.
Well,
it feels like I really like.
I think there's still a fair amount of that going on, but you can tell that the reins
enough to keep the suspense.
Yeah, the reins have been loosened enough to where interviews like this are actually substantive and interesting.
Yeah, and I think what may be perfectly well possible is that they are now in control of censoring themselves. They can make the choices about what to talk about and what not to talk about.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, there was right. Okay, so PMC asks, "How about your favorite song, MOAMETAL?" This interview is older, so this is before she landed on her Papaya talking point. So what she said is, "I really cannot make up my mind on that. Plus, we still have songs with no choreography yet. As far as I can tell by listening to the album, I like Brand New Day. But I would say to the reader of the PMC magazine, you should really listen to BMC." Which caused PMC to laugh because the joke being that, BMC sounds like PMC.
Yes.
PMC says, "You prepared that joke." And Moa says, "Yep, I think both titles sound similar. I absolutely want people who are reading this to love the song BMC."
Yeah. Moa dropping the dad joke there.
Yeah. Oh, I missed the part that I meant to read. Moa said, "I wanted to say this more than anything today."
That's great. She had it planned out.
Yeah.
Golden.
This would have been a great interview to be filmed. I would have loved to watch this one.
Yeah. So let's see. Another thing that I think comes up a lot here. I'm skipping around now in such a way that I'm no longer finding things. But where is it? Well, what I'm looking for is the thing where they talk about like not actually trying to make the third album better than the other two.
Oh, sure. That was a question directed to Moa. We were not concerned with whether the new album would be better than the previous ones, because it was so different. We created this album as a truly new type of work, and I surely get the sense of Nanja Koya from it myself.
So
is that what you were looking for?
That is indeed. I'm assuming that... So Nanja Koya is not actually a phrase that I had heard before, although PMC seems to like it very, very much. And I assume that it is essentially the same thing as like, what is it? It's like Nanja Korea or something like that. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, that's how I understand that.
Yeah, but so the thing that's interesting about this, they do talk about this in some sort of specificity, I guess, is that this is actually something that is surprising even to people who are already fans. Like they were subverting the expectations of people who had expectations as well.
Yeah, I think that answers some questions, because I got to admit I kind of had a what the hell vibe my first listen through, because I was super surprised on how different everything sounded, in a good way. A lot of things have really grown on me since the album dropped, but it's cool to hear that was intentional.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, PMC is just like starting to ask about the album, and Moa says, "I thought, is this really metal?" Listening to the new album, particularly after going through the Dark Side period, I realized that we had created too much of this particular baby metal image ourselves, and that we were bound by the ideas of this is what baby metal should be. And Metal Galaxy reminded me of the fact that baby metal originally was a group which can create amusing things. It's not about whether the album is not metal or not baby metal. We see it as a fun product that we generally want to deliver, this kind of music. Mm-hmm. And that we want many people to listen to it. The idea is that they are evolving, that it's different, that it's not what you were expecting.
Right. And that definitely fits the theme of the album. The last thing I want to mention, just because I've grandstanded on this before, PMC talking about Shine, getting the feeling that their dancing is going to evolve. Metal mentioning, even the song Shine is not in its final form yet. We are still in the process of trial and error, and I do not think we will make any compromise here either. And I only mention that because I really want the 2-person Shine to come back with Moa on guitar. I think that is the definitive version.
Yeah. I think this was the thing I was trying to find. They're talking a little bit about, how baby metal perseveres and makes no compromises and stuff. Sue says, "I think we were always a challenger. In the beginning, we were challenging against the genre of metal music, and the name of baby metal gradually came to be known. We were in obscurity at first, but now, thankfully, we are recognized like that's baby metal, even abroad. Although we were glad to be recognized, it would not look much like baby metal if we see that as our goal in itself. That's why we broke down something called baby metal ourselves in this album. This is us keeping the challenge alive by even breaking through what had been known as baby metal."
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess it was all intentional. I mean, I think is what I'm getting out of that. That it was intentional and they're on board.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
The only other thing I think I wanted to talk about in this interview was the younger generations bit. Yeah, so PMC asks kind of like near the end here. Thus far, baby metal has become more popular by getting encouragement and support from major bands like Metallica and Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now, are you two thinking of guiding a younger generation? And SU-METAL mentioned, she said, "We talked a little bit about this a moment ago. We've always wanted youths or younger generations who do not listen to metal music to think that metal is fun. Although in the beginning we felt ourselves a little uncomfortable performing metal music, we still want people to find the good of this genre. Recently I found something very interesting. When we started baby metal, I thought more bands like us, female bands playing hard and heavy music, would come out. On the contrary, however, some metal bands are now becoming more popish and employing dance performances, which was very interesting to me. I was like, yeah, that's one way of doing it." So, yeah, I mean, even though Moa is the comedian, Sue has her moments.
Uh-huh.
But
Oh, that's great.
anyway, yeah. So, I mean, I think we probably hit most of the major points. Even though we read a lot of it to you, listeners, I think it's worth reading. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about here and a lot of interesting things. And it's nice to, sort of read it in more or less their own words.
Yeah, I can't thank the people that translate this enough. It's really pretty great.
Yeah.
So thank you, translators.
Oh, yeah. And actually, that reminds me, speaking of that, I think the last time we talked a bit about Mikiko's interview, and I don't think we need to sort of go into that again. There's one more interview in this issue of the magazine, the PMC magazine from BABYMETAL, that we do not have a proper translation for. But I scanned it, and I ran OCR over the scan, and I copied and pasted it into Google Translate.
He's the man.
Just because I wanted to get some kind of sense of what was there, even though I know that it's not going to be fully, it's not really a translation exactly.
Uh-huh.
But it looks like it'll be pretty interesting. It's BABYMETAL talking a fair amount about just kind of like the concept of sun and moon, and sort of defending the idea that even though 3 had been a central number to BABYMETAL, 2 had also been. So there's a light side and a dark side, and red night and black night and so forth.
Right.
He did sort of explicitly say that Sue was, went with sun and MOAMETAL went with moon, right? Sort of obvious, I suppose. There was a hint. Oh, I didn't follow this up, but there's a hint in there, if I understood it right, that if you look at the 2 discs, there might actually be some kind of correspondence between the tracks on the discs as well. So, like, track 2 might have some relationship to track 2 on the other disc.
Oh, interesting.
So he said they are lined up like a sumo wrestling list. But
okay.
so
thank you, Google.
I meant to look at that, but I'm curious to know. But he also sort of talked about how that it's basically the interviewer was saying it's kind of unusual to split up an album like this. This is kind of old school to have 2 discs. But
yeah, I suppose it is. Now that he mentioned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the last album I had or bought that was split into 2 discs. It might have been 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I hadn't thought of that.
But it's Koba kind of defended it in the in Japan version by kind of pointing out that in Japan there actually people do buy physical discs.
Yeah.
So
true.
So the international ones are all in one, and so I know that I have heard this next bit before, and I can't remember if it was just somebody had like quickly looked at this interview or whether he said it somewhere else, but there do appear to be songs recorded beyond the 16 songs that made it onto Metal Galaxy. We knew that before, right?
I mean, I feel like it was kind of assumed.
We know that they have a larger catalog of written music than has been released.
You're right.
Yeah.
And while they haven't said that necessarily in those words, we know that there are songs
on deck.
There's songs on deck. That's a good way of putting it. But what's the one from Metal Galaxy that was actually written back when Megan Itsune was written?
Night Night Burn.
Night Night Burn. Yeah.
Night Night Burn. Yeah. So we know that there's other stuff out there.
Yeah. On
the shelf, probably ready to go.
It was that whatever interview that was in. That's the one that we knew that told us that there were more than there were songs that left off of Metal Galaxy.
Mm-hmm. Well, just like we know there were songs that were left off the debut, songs that were left off Metal Resistance.
Right.
So who knows how much extra stuff is out there.
Another thing that I thought was kind of interesting was that, again, I'm not exactly sure how much of this is getting lost in translation, but it seemed like Koba 2 is expressing this kind of like, there is a core baby metalness that he was protecting in a way. So he talked about how he was grateful to, all the collaborators, not just for agreeing to participate, but also agreeing not to be central. Like they're agreeing to participate as a part of a BABYMETAL project, and it's not the collaborators. It's not co-authored exactly. They're participating.
Sure, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. didn't occur to me before. But, I mean, like, if it occurred to me at all, it kind of occurred to me as like, well, that's in a sense they feel almost like wasted.
I mean, after reading that, it kind of makes me feel doubtful over getting any like live features other than F-Hero.
Yeah, I don't know,
but
maybe
I don't want to lose all hopes. But
I don't want to really. I'm hesitant to infer things from Professor Google's
you never
words.
can accurately.
Well,
there's that, and it's a baby.
Yeah, so we've got kind of the double negative of it's Professor Google's words from BABYMETAL. So
right. Yeah. So we can see what comes out when the like real translation is, but it did kind of look like that there was kind of like a distinction being drawn there, that this is really still BABYMETAL.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like, again, guessing a little bit, but it sounded like Kobo was asked whose decision it was to do such a like intense tour, whether it was Kobo's or Sue and Moa's, and he answered basically that it was everybody. Everybody wanted to do that, partly due to the fact that they get incrementally better, as they do shows.
Oh, sure.
So, which would seem to be an argument for going to the last one, but
going to the last show on tour is always a good idea. Pro tip. Yeah. It's always the best. It's been that way as long as I've been a fan.
Mm-hmm. And he did say that he would like to do big tours in South America or Asia, but there have been logistical complications.
Sure.
So,
well, there's hope.
Yeah. And I believe Kobo was attributing this to Sue and Moa, but generally they prefer to go to places where it's warm. Like when it's warm.
That's funny.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. But anyway, I'm looking forward to reading like a good translation of that. But
right.
It was still kind of fun to read the Google Translate version. There were a couple of other points that I put down. Where did I put it? Oh yeah. So this just a couple of thoughts that it reminded me of. The first one that kind of occurred to me that I sort of wanted to see what you thought of. I feel like this was a kind of an epiphany in a way that maybe it shouldn't have been, and maybe it's wrong. But there's always these discussions about like, people arguing about like, is BABYMETAL metal? What is required for something to be metal? Like, as I was thinking about that, one of the things that sort of occurred to me is that I think maybe maybe I said this last episode too, but I think maybe what Koba's idea might have been was as a sort of a method of being able to reinvent the genre a little bit, kind of taking the perspective of little girls who don't really understand metal and kind of like doing the things that it seems like they're perceiving in metal, so the big stage shows and the like all the sort of the fire and the stuff that looks like lore, things like that, but still done in the way a little girl would see it and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is, I mean, there's a certain kind of comicalness to it, at least initially, right? It's kind of like, Weird Al or something, right?
I get it.
At the same time, it's I think that was just a tool to make something that is really kind of deep in its own thing. But but I think that really is kind of the concept it was originally, that it isn't trying to be metal like metal people define metal. It's metal as seen by a 13-year-old.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective for sure.
Yeah, never really thought of it that way.
Yeah,
and that may mean that it's changing now, right? I mean, because the way they see it now is less naive.
True. Yeah, but
I guess it also makes it more sensible. Like, people often complain about like, how can this be metal? These the girls didn't know what metal even was when they started, and I think that's kind of the point, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, anyway, so that's my hypothesis. So the other thing I put down here was the increasing agency of Sue and Moa, which I don't know if we touched on that as much as I thought we would, but it seems like they're being put in charge of things, or they're thinking about things. It seems like they're participating in decisions. I don't know. Do you agree? Can you figure out support?
It sounds like from recent interviews that they have a lot more say in what goes on, what happens in their world. Where I feel like in the past 9 years that they've kind of been on a track Koba put them on. I feel like they're kind of in charge of that track now, at least to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again,
I don't know if they. Oh, go ahead.
I'm always skeptical, just because we've been burned so much in the past.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a question about whether we fully believe what they say. Right.
It definitely feels like that from reading as many interviews as we have, that they definitely have more control and more say over what they do and how they do it. Their input is certainly more valued now that they're, mid-career seasoned performers and adults,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but at the same time, we still get a lot of things that, I don't know, I would just call maybe the Koba era or Koba way of doing things with the lore and only the Fox God knows. And it's hard to say if that's a facade that they're choosing to keep or if management is choosing to impose. And I think with like a lot of things, the answer probably lies in the middle with this, that yes, more artistic control has been passed on to the girls. But management is still there and is still management.
Mm-hmm. Can we get a check of when the last time they said only the Fox God knows was?
Oh.
'Cause I feel like it's been a long time.
No, it hasn't.
No, it's days.
No? Watch it been like,
days. Days.
Typical.
Yeah. Hours.
Cam Metals.
Hours even? That's okay. I'm not backed up.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
A couple of people in the chat, Corvine and Cam Metal, both pointed out the Loudwire interview.
Within seconds.
Yeah, no, so it's still a thing that's there.
Yeah, but they do. I mean, so there is a sense in which it sounds like Mo is making some decisions about what she does with respect to the individual Avengers. And there's another thing too. I wonder if it's at the end of this interview where they talk about oh no, I don't know what it was. It was actually in, I think, PMC volume 13, where they were talking a little bit about how they, basically whether they have roles. And so this is from the earlier interview, PMC volume 13, which PMC asked, "Are you aware of something like a role for MOAMETAL?" And MOAMETAL says, "I almost don't have any role mentality, although of course I have the scream and dance role. But when SU-METAL consults me about songs, I say, I want you to sing it like this. And SU-METAL too says to me, I think in that dance it would be more interesting," and so forth. So, so that's why I think the team made BABYMETAL strong rather than mental roles. I had a sensation
Sure.
each and every one is BABYMETAL.
Right.
But it does seem like they're at least giving each other feedback.
Yeah. And I would wager that that's something they've done almost since the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true.
And it's not like, I'm thinking back on other interviews and things we've seen from the past. It's not like what they're doing now is unprecedented. There have been interviews where they've opened up and talked in a way that felt genuine. 2015, 2016, when they were a little older. And we're kind of back to that. I think the difference is this time that their language is more mature and they know what to talk about and they know how to talk to a reporter and not lean so heavily on prepared answers. Maybe I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that's why it kind of makes it hard to judge how much control they have over the product as a whole versus Koba Metal or the rest of management.
Sure. Yeah, and actually, the next thing I was going to mention kind of goes against that in a way. Well, actually, let me see if I can find this thing in the Koba Metal translation thing that I did. So this is right now I'm kind of just going to read a choppy Google Translate thing. But so PMC asks, talking about listening to Metal Galaxy and thinking about how SU-METAL has grown as an extraordinary vocalist and how the variety of singing is quite, varied. There's some songs that surprise you, and how can she sing like this? Is there a feeling that you intentionally tried to open a drawer that SU-METAL had not opened before? So this is they're asking Koba Metal this. And somewhere in his answer, he says, while searching for what kind of approach to SU-METAL at present, I tried to draw out various things like, what if I tried to challenge this kind of thing? I'm very conscious of opening them gradually. And so I guess that came out less like English than I had anticipated. But I guess the thing I'm wondering about is whether, to what extent some of this is kind of almost like pedagogical. Like they're like some of these decisions were made in order to actually kind of build their performance abilities. So putting challenges in their way incrementally that they can overcome. So like, in the 2018 era, introducing professional dancers to kind of like level up Sue and Moa's dancing, and then introducing Avengers to force them to kind of like verbally express what they've been doing and clarify what it is that makes baby metal. It feels like there's almost kind of like a guidedness to this that's still like teaching them something.
That's really interesting perspective. I hadn't considered that. And it would be a great way.
I feel like that's something I could grab onto.
Yeah, it would be. It would be a great way to level up. Was a great phrase you used to challenge them in specific ways to grow them as artists, without sending them back to Sakura Gakuen or something.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's sort of it's organic. It sort of allows them to always be challenged a little bit.
Yeah. That's really cool perspective, if true. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, and of course, all of this might just be complete nonsense, but it seemed like it was not impossible.
So I'm a little hesitant to talk about this interview without a natural translation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I wouldn't. The idea didn't really come from that. It came more from kind of like Moa talking about how having the professional dancers and then having the Avengers kind of shaped how they. It's not exactly re-envisioned themselves, but kind of clarified something that had become almost sort of like intuitive. Yeah,
the pieces do fit for your hypothesis and your takeaway from that.
Yeah. I think that was all. Those are all the only sort of comments I wanted to get in. But once again, I feel like I've just been talking and talking and talking. How's it going?
We can come back to this one when we get a human translation.
Yeah, we do have all of Hedoban 24 still to be translated. And I haven't even, I haven't made any attempt to scan and OCR it or anything. But that's really big. So I'm anticipating that's pretty interesting. Unfortunately, it's kind of weird how insulated I feel from the Japanese fan base. Like they all know, presumably, what's in that.
I would hope so.
So, I mean, maybe the fact that we haven't heard anything means that it's, in fact, not groundbreaking, but who knows?
Still be nice to see.
Maybe that just means we need to get a bilingual fan to come on the show and talk about it with us.
That's true. That would not be bad at all. Yeah, I think it would be kind of interesting actually to talk with somebody who's kind of in both fan bases.
I'll see what we can do.
All right. Perfect. I don't really have anything else. I guess we've been recording for a while now.
Yeah, I think we've caught up.
Yeah. So maybe we can actually plan for the topic for the next podcast to be whatever comes of Legend of Metal Galaxy. I can't imagine that there's going to be not a podcast's worth of stuff to talk about.
Oh, there's going to be.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to avoid talking about that one, even if nothing happens.
Right. So that'll be the plan, and that gets us off the hook for not having figured out what we were going to do as the next topic. So
yes.
All right. Anything else?
No.
All right.
No, I don't think so.
Well, thank you everyone for podcasting with me. Thank you everyone in the chat room for joining us. And that's it for this episode. You can join us on the Baby Metal Podcast Discord to continue the conversation. Rating the podcast on whatever platform you listen on will help people find it, so please do that. We'll be back here in 3 weeks. We hope you'll join us then. And until then, see you.